Welcome, everyone. My name is Rhonda, and I am a member of the Webcast and Events team here at HR.com. And it is my pleasure to host this webcast, The 4 Things You Have to Know Before You Shop for an AI Product, sponsored by Capacity. So this webcast has been pre-approved for 1 HRCI and 1 SHRM credit. Please be sure to attend the complete webcast in order to receive your credits. You will receive an email from HR.com within 2 business days, and this will include your certification credit information. And you may also go to your HR.com membership profile, view my credits page, and you will see the credits that you've received. If you have questions during the webcast today, please click on the Q&A in your webinar controls, enter the questions there, and the presenter will take a look at those. Once the presentation has begun, a link to the slides and a link to the exit survey will be posted in the chat area. So that will prompt a new browser to open with the survey. Please be sure to fill that out once the webcast has been completed. All right, so that's all the logistics on my end here, and it is now my absolute pleasure to turn it over today to introduce you to Justin Schmidt.
Thank you, Rhonda. Hi, I'm Justin Schmidt. I'm the VP of Marketing here at Capacity. And as Rhonda said, today we're going to do something a little different and do an educational buyer's guide on what the things you need to do and have in mind going into shopping for an AI product. So we've got 4 major themes that we're going to cover, and very much looking forward to sharing some insights with you guys that, as someone who spends their 9 to 5 trying to bring an AI product to market and also in marketing to HR as well, I learned a lot of things that I think I can hopefully make you better shoppers and more informed shoppers as you're navigating this landscape. So without further ado, definitely want to thank HR.com for the opportunity. We've done a couple webinars and various partnerships with HR.com over the past couple of years, and I'm very grateful for it. And I firmly believe we have a lot to offer the HR.com audience, and thrilled to be here today. So let's cover our agenda. So the first thing we're going to cover is bridging the AI education gap. Then we're going to dive into how to plan for the purchase of an AI solution. And then we're going to talk about some questions to ask when evaluating vendors. And we'll wrap up for today with some tips for successfully implementing AI in your organization. So kind of the pre-research phase through the actual research phase, through the negotiation and purchase, and then afterwards. So let's get started here. Bridging the AI education gap. So, I have a firm belief that one of the most important things to do before you dive into any new paradigm or any new era is to understand the basic terms. I could have honestly made this entire deck just definitions and really dived into the minutia of artificial intelligence and machine learning and all the different millions of ways it can go. But I wanted to start with some very sort of simple concepts, and that way you've got a sort of bedrock foundation to go do further research on your own and get started. So before we dive into the next slides, I broke these into 2 groups. And this is not an official, academic bifurcation of definitions. This is just something that I like to organize them myself, and that is definitions and words that really matter to the computer science side of the artificial intelligence landscape, and then some words that we as humans coexisting and interacting with AI have to keep top of mind. So let's start with the software-related terms first. First up is artificial intelligence. And artificial intelligence is quite simply software that learns to replicate intelligent human behavior. So for better or for worse, when people think of AI, they think of all sorts of things. They think of everything from a Amazon Alexa sitting in your living room, all the way up to a self-driving car from Tesla, all the way through to a IBM Watson deep blue giant server farm that can, you know, diagnose rare forms of cancer based off of X-rays, right? All of those are simply just trying to replicate the intelligent human behavior that we as humans do. So something like driving a car, for example, we take it for granted, but our brains are making, you know, millions of decisions a second, and we're thinking about all the different data that comes in, we're processing it, and we're turning that into the act of us driving a car, knowing to stop at stop signs and put our blinkers on, and knowing when to brake when a car is in front of us slows down, all that kind of stuff. We take it for granted, but that's the kind of thing that artificial intelligence is, and the computer science behind it is working to solve today. So algorithm. An algorithm at its very simplest is simply a formula or set of rules for performing a task. A lot of times when people think of an algorithm, they think of really complex math and, you know, this giant Byzantine page full of code. But at the end of the day, it's just a set of rules, right? Following a recipe for making soup is an algorithm. Measuring out the ingredients, putting them in, waiting for a certain temperature to reach before you add the next thing, all that stuff. That's just an algorithm. And much like AI itself, this is a term that I think people assign more meaning to than what it actually is. But at the end of the day, it's just a formula for performing a specific task. NLP, so this is short for natural language processing. You'll often hear it more as its acronym than people saying natural language processing. And that's simply a field of artificial intelligence that enables computers to analyze and understand human language. This is something that here at Capacity we deal with a lot because our product is the chat interface is a big component of it. And, you know, it's really easy, I think, for people to take for granted how much sort of computer science magic goes into something as simple as talking to an Alexa, right? So you walk into your house and for some reason you're not sure of what's going on in today's world, and you ask Alexa, who's the president of the United States? Alexa's going to say, President of the United States is Donald Trump. And you're going to say, where is he born? And Alexa will say, you know, New York. How old is he? And Alexa will say 73, 74, however old he is. And what's fascinating about this is that as a human, really easy for me to talk to somebody and I say, who's the president? They give me the answer. And then I say, where was he born? And the person I'm talking to understands the context that he means the person we were just talking about, right? But for a computer to sort of go through that logic and come to that conclusion is really cool. So natural language processing, NLP, this is something you'll hear about a lot in the interfaces that we use AI. Machine learning. Okay, so this is the concept of computer programming, learning and adapting to new data without human interference. So I think of it this way, like a machine doing machine learning and a human making soup. There's some similarities here. A machine can simulate, you know, a process or a system or whatever it is, hundreds of thousands of times in a second, or, you know, millions of times over the course of the training set, where a human will, you know, put in the ingredients, taste. You should always taste your food while you're cooking, right? Taste the soup and say, oh, this needs salt, add salt to it. Oh, this needs pepper, add pepper. Oh, I should boil the potatoes longer, whatever it is, right? Our process of doing the same thing over and over again and iterating and trying to see what needs to be solved along the way is the exact same thing that computers do through machine learning. They can just do it a lot faster and through much larger data sets than we can. But where we're better for now and what is emerging in AI is this concept of deep learning. So deep learning is an AI function that imitates the human brain in processing data and creating patterns for use in decision making. So the way I look at this is, you know, deep learning is a subset of machine learning. to use our Alexa example, I'm going to come back to Amazon and Tesla a bunch of times throughout this presentation. But if you go into your kitchen, let's say the light's off, and you say, Alexa, turn on the kitchen light. Alexa knows that turn on the kitchen light means to take the light up that it knows is in the kitchen and then to turn it on, because of running through all the different variations of the way people say turn on the kitchen light. Alexa, turn on the light. Alexa, switch the lights to on. Alexa, turn the lights on. And it will, it knows that all those variants are still essentially the same way of saying the same thing. Or I'm sorry, different ways of saying the same thing, right? But deep learning would be, for example, and Amazon's not there yet. They will be soon enough, but deep learning is going into the kitchen and being like, Alexa, it's dark in here. And being able to understand that the concept of it being dark is analogous to Alexa, turn on the lights. Making that connection is what deep learning is. So machine learning is running through the same thing a bazillion times over and over and over again to arrive at a output. Deep learning is being able to make these logic leaps that we take for granted because we were all born with, the world's most advanced supercomputer between our ears, right? But as AI develops, deep learning is going to be continually important. Okay, so we talked about the software-related terms. Let's look at some of the stuff that applies more specifically to humans. So the first one is this concept of human in the loop. And this is essentially human intervention when the AI does not get it right. This intervention then provides data to train the AI for the next time that particular situation comes up. So again, let's go back to Amazon. I'm going to pick on them for a minute here because as a Alexa user, this frustrates me. But believe it or not, buried deep within the bowels of your Alexa app, there's a place you can go where you can review the commands you gave and the answer you got back. And you can tell them, no, this is not what I meant. And they aggregate that up. And then their engineers look at it and go, I see. When people ask Alexa, turn on the light, what they don't want to hear is, sure, I'll play In the Light by Led Zeppelin. You know what I mean? That sort of failure where a human comes in. The way we look at this in our world is, if someone asks a question of the chatbot, and the chatbot gives them an answer that wasn't quite right, they can hit a button and that gets routed to a what's called a co-pilot in our parlance, but it's a human in the loop. This is someone sitting at your organization that says, oh, Amanda asked for her vacation balance. We gave her the vacation days meant to be balanced. Let me correct it. And then the next time someone asks for vacation balance, it get fixed. So it's this graceful failure where the AI goes to a human to complete the cycle there. Another common example of this is if you ever go to log into something and you get a CAPTCHA and you have to click the boxes that have a stop sign in them, for example. What that really is taking data from Google's self-driving car initiatives and basically letting humans say, actually, a stop sign can also look like this, and then that data comes back and it feeds the model. Robotic process automation, my least favorite worded term in this entire category of technology. This is really just the use of specialized software bots to automate and standardize repeatable processes. So you may be saying, okay, that sounds like a computer-related term, Justin. Why is this in the human terms section of your deck? And the answer to that is because when you think of the intersection of AI and humans, there's two places I think that most commonly comes up. One is, how do we help the AI? And then two, what is it that the AI is actually doing for us? What's the actual point of where the AI is going to be doing work that normally we wouldn't do, right? And this is the term that kind of describes that. And in the industry, you'll see this kind of conflated with other things like process automation or simply automation. The field of workflows, for example, is starting to coalesce into RPA. The industry is starting to call this RPA, much like we started calling facial tissues Kleenexes. But we call them workflows with our product, and our content team here at Capacity do a really great guide on robotic process automation, which you can find on our site. I'll link to it later, but this is a good thing to understand. And the reason is because RPA, and one of the consequences of automating some tasks, is this concept of reskilling. You hear this a lot. Amazon, I believe it was, recently announced a massive investment in reskilling a lot of their workers, right? So they've got these giant warehouses that there's a lot of automation that goes on to take your whiteboard eraser or whatever it is that you bought, get it off the shelf into a box into your house in 2 days, right? So reskilling is simply the practice of updating and improving the skills of your team, right? So if you think of RPA and process automation coming in and starting to augment and do some processes that we would normally do, that opens up the opportunity to continue to reskill. Now, you could say that, this is also a bad thing because the robots are coming to take our jobs, but I don't think that's true. I think this is more of an option to free people up to do the more higher order thinking that humans are better at, right? And this is something that's at the top of mind at companies across the globe. Okay, this isn't just something that the fringe of the computer science and artificial intelligence industry is starting to think of. This is a thing that's top of mind and being actively invested in everywhere. And to illustrate this, I found a study on McKinsey, the analyst firm, and they have really great free content. I recommend everyone subscribe to it. And they sent me an article just last week, actually, as I was working on this deck, so it was very serendipitous. But they did a study on they took a big sample of companies that are doing at least $100 million in revenue, so medium to large size businesses, and asked them how important the reskilling and retraining and retraining of their team is going to be in the age of automation and digitization. And 66% of these businesses are surveyed viewed it as a top priority, and a little over a third did not. Now, I oversimplified this donut chart simply because I didn't want to get into all the different ways the data was sliced, but I highly recommend you go read the article, because it's interesting in that, like, at the large end of the market, where the benefits of automation are sort of most obviously seen, right? If you've got 1,000 people each doing a task that takes 10 minutes, being able to automate that, you're saving 10,000 minutes of time, and that gets very valuable as it scales. This is a top of mind initiative for a majority. And the reason I bring that up is because it's really important to remember that AI is here to augment, not replace, right? It was actually an HR.com webinar that I was watching that another vendor in a similar space to ours was doing, and they did a study that in conjunction with HR.com, and the key takeaway there was that HR professionals, and I don't want to speak for all HR professionals, but in this study, are more concerned about not just saving time, but freeing themselves up to do the more higher order stuff, right? So if you've got new hire paperwork you got to blast through, or a mountain of when it's open enrollment and you've got to go through the process of getting people to sign off on the changes or whatever. Like that's time not spent on thinking about what are some enhancements we can make to our employee experience programs, or what are some of the ways we can put boots on the ground, so to speak, to improve ESAT scores or whatever it is, right? Being able to augment the rote, repetitive stuff frees up us as people to do more higher order thinking. And I think it's very important just to always remember, and I know you could say, oh, coming from a guy that tries to bring AI to the market, right? Take it with a grain of salt, but I mean this sincerely, because I mean, think about it, right? I'm a marketer who came of age in the online digital world. A lot of what I do, in terms of editing bids inside of AdWords, or doing an analysis to see which keywords we need to target on our site or whatever, AI can do a lot of that for me now. And it's really freed me up to think more strategically and broadly. And I think my journey as a marketing professional going through the AI-ification, to make up a word of this, is analogous to HR as well. So that's our first section on bridging the AI education gap. So now let's talk about how to plan the purchase of an AI solution, specifically thinking in terms of systems. So to plan effectively, you need to understand the systems in your organization. So AI is best suited to augment and speed up and optimize systems. And so, for example, in order to properly automate a process or something, you really need to understand what it is you want to automate, how that system works, and then how you can find a solution that best covers it for you. If we remember nothing else in this presentation, I think this blue section that we're about to go through is most key. So what is a system? Good question. A system is a group of connected elements with a shared purpose. Systems can be large, like the global economy. A system can be very small, like me, my morning routine, right? It can be very complicated. It can be very simple. It can require years. The Mother Nature in all her beauty and wonder is a very complicated system that operates on a time scale that our feeble minds can't even comprehend, right? Or a system can be very quickly ran, like when you ask Alexa who's the president of the United States, there's a bunch of quick computer magic that happens and boom, the answer comes out. But ultimately, regardless of this, a system, all of them, large, small, short, long, et cetera, all consist of the same three components, okay? So there's your inputs. These are the raw materials that go into the system. There's your outputs. Excuse me, this is what the system produces. And then there's a feedback loop. And this is the process of taking the outputs to inform the inputs, to therefore drive efficiency and create more outputs with fewer inputs. Every system on Earth is designed around these components. There's a really good book called Thinking in Systems. Cannot remember the author's name off the top of my head, but she does a beautiful job of explaining this concept and how it applies to all sorts of different avenues. So let's just do it as a quick example, just for the sake of framing this in our heads. Let's think of farming. This is a perfect example of a system. You've got your inputs, which is seeds, the water, sunlight, soil, et cetera, which then drives an output, which is the actual crops plus additional seeds. And then there's the feedback loop of adjusting the fertilizer, rotating the crops, planting new seeds, et cetera, that then therefore drives more input, right? So inputs, outputs, feedback loops. So let's get to something relevant to us and everybody online today here for our little talk. And that's a commonly seen system in HR, which is employee onboarding. Now, I'm being really reductive here on what goes into onboarding as a system here, but this is illustrative, right? So your input is the employee profile data, any training materials, the tickets and tasks to provision a laptop, to install whatever software they need to get their W-2s, et cetera, et cetera. And then the output of that system is a team member that feels welcomed, a team member that feels productive, a happy hiring manager. And there's feedback loops that we all have built in, the employee satisfaction scores. If you're measuring if onboarding happens at scale at your organization, the speed in which that process takes place is an important thing to measure, as well as the employee effectiveness, right? And all that goes back into the input so that the next new hire goes through a more efficient and more optimized onboarding system. So that's great, Justin. Why does this all matter? Good question. You have to map out your systems before you engage an AI vendor. In the whole customer journey, the whole buying cycle, whatever you want to call it, I think this is the most important step when it comes to dealing with AI, because capacity or any other AI vendor you talk to in this space, or any vendor that has an AI product within their offering, at the end of the day, you're applying that AI to a system, so mapping out is super important. And therefore, the details really, really, really matter. So this next slide is a risky one to show at lunchtime. It's going to make me hungry by the time I'm done with it, but I think it's a perfect illustration of what I'm getting at here, and that is the peanut butter jelly sandwich exercise. So this is one of my favorite examples of how we take so many things in a system for granted, and the steps in that process for granted. So MIT has a famous exercise where, so Amanda, she's in the room with me. If I were to write out the instructions for making a PBJ, I give them to Amanda, and she follows them to the letter, like literally follows them, doesn't make any inferences or any leaps of logic, just literally follows the steps I give her. Invariably, the first pass at this, some sort of hilarious catastrophic failure happens. Like, for example, the instructions didn't say to open the jar, or the instructions didn't explicitly say how much jelly you should put on a slice of bread, or how much peanut butter you should use, whatever it is. And then over time, as we go through this, the instructions get clearer and clearer. The components and inputs of the system get better defined. The output of the system gets more in line with what I'm expecting, and the feedback loop helps drive all. There's a real great viral video that was from a few years ago. I've got a link to it on the final slide here, of a dad he's clearly an engineer somewhere, and he's got his two kids. It's like a 4 or 5 year old boy and like a 9 or 10 year old girl, and he's going through this with them, and it's absolutely hilarious how much of a clown show it is. These poor kids trying to write these instructions for their dad to make a sandwich because jelly ends up everywhere and the bread gets smashed. It's really funny, but it's illustrative of my point that you really have to think this thing through, and really have to start thinking about the inputs of the system. So this says then you really need to document everything in the system, right? Like, what is the order of the steps? What people are involved? What tools are involved? What software are you needing to log into, and how does that software need to talk to each other, right? What information is involved? Is there stuff where does that information live, right? Do you have information that's in a knowledge base somewhere? Do you have information that's in an app somewhere? Is it something inside, Brian and IT's head? Really, though, you also need to understand how it's all measured, right? This is your feedback loop. And if you properly scope your system, you'll properly scope the price of what it is you're trying to buy, right? You could go through this exercise of mapping out your system, and you could find that, hey, maybe I don't necessarily need a vendor for this, but going through this exercise, I realized, onboarding isn't our issue. Our issue is 360 feedback, or getting the managers to do one-on-ones every 2 weeks or something, right? So if you really properly scope the system, you'll properly scope the price of what it is you're trying to buy. So the next slide I'm going to show you is intentionally complex. I'm going to break almost every sacred rule of presentations with this thing, but I have a point to make with it, and that is that systems are, especially something like onboarding, is much more complicated than I think we kind of think in the top of our head, right? So what you see here is this is a, slight names were changed to protect privacy here, but this is a systems map of the onboarding process from a customer of ours, large company. And the point that to get to this, our solutions consultant worked with them to get to this. To get to this, we had lots of interviews with them, lots of trading back information, calls, etc. And the point is, something like onboarding, you've got the hiring manager, you have the ops team, you have the HR team, you have the IT team, you have the new hire themselves, you've got meetings they have to attend. There's applications that have to be used. There's databases that all that data has to get written to. There's literal paperwork that has to get generated and then pushed back into the HRIS, Workday, or Zenefits, or whoever it was in this case. I can't remember. But my point is that you need to have this level of detail for whatever it is you're doing. Otherwise, your conversation with the vendor is going to, the expectations aren't going to be there. And we'll go over this in a little bit later, but like, you really need to sort of define what success is. So at the end of the day, like, you really need to understand systems, right? And our recap here, thinking about onboarding specifically, understand your inputs, document everything, no matter how trivial. What apps do you need to go to? What's the login screen? What buttons do you click, et cetera, et cetera. Outputs, verify every single step of the process, right? If you enter in a W-2, that means that information needs to live somewhere, and verify that it lives there. And then have your feedback loop and a plan to measure each part of the system. Okay, so we talked about systems. Let's go to the third section, the green section, as I've called it inside my head. And these are the questions to ask when evaluating partners. So what follows are just some smatterings of questions that either A, don't get asked enough, or B, I'm always grateful when people do ask these. And some of these are questions you should be asking yourself kind of before you talk to the vendor. Others are questions you need to ask the vendor directly. And I'm a big believer in the power of asking questions. I tell my team all the time, like, they're talking to someone, I don't know, play dumb and ask a bunch of questions. It's amazing what you find out. So I don't know a lot of Levi Strauss quotes, but I've always liked this one, and that an expert knows all the answers if you ask the right questions. So knowing that, let's dive in. And again, this is a topic where I could have probably filled this entire presentation with just examples of questions, but I wanted to have some variety here, right? So where can I use AI? It's a pretty solid question to ask before you even get started in this. And for the answer to this, I'm going to borrow from Dave Costanero. He's our chief data scientist, really great dude. He's also the executive director of our sister nonprofit, Prepare.ai. And he does a talk, a general sort of AI proselytization talk a lot. And this is a slide, a redesigned slide from his deck, basically. But where can I use AI? You can use one situation as in the 1 second rule. So think of it this way. If a human can do the task in 1 second, it's a prime candidate for applying AI to automate it, right? So think of, imagine you're reviewing security footage and you want to identify when somebody approaches the door, right? Your brain can do that in 1 second. And companies like Ring and Nest. They're doing this with doorbells, right? It's an AI that learns, oh, here comes a person. This is a person, not a pet, so I'm going to trigger an alert, right? I'm going to let the homeowner know someone's approaching the door. It's the 1 second rule. The second one is the fuzzy cell rule. So if you have a giant analysis with all sorts of like dependent variables, imagine like a giant spreadsheet where you're modeling out your your budget for the next year, and you've got you're using a software that has like a per seat license, and you're trying to calculate how many seats do I need to buy, et cetera, et cetera. And it all comes down to like one sort of cell that is a WAG, right? A wild ass guess. That's where AI is really good, because it can, do the machine learning that we talked about and run through a million different permutations of this thing and come to what's mostly the optimal result. So the fuzzy cell rule. The third one is X marks the data. So algorithms and the algorithms that feed machine and deep learning are very data hungry, right? The more data they have, the more opportunity they have to train themselves, the better they're going to do. So in the HR world, if you think of like scanning resumes, this is a great example. There's some vendors that do really cool stuff with sort of recruiting pipeline management. Go to HR Tech or one of those shows, and you see for SHRM, you see all sorts of them. There's a lot of data in a resume, and here at Capacity, AI company in the heartland of the United States here in St. Louis. When we post a job opening for an engineer, we get hundreds and hundreds of resumes. I can only imagine what it's like when Facebook or Google or one of those guys posts a job, right? They're getting just bombarded in resumes, and to be able to go through all that to kind of bubble up the right ones. You don't want the hiring managers to grab the top half of the stack of resumes, toss them in the trash, and be like, I don't hire unlucky people there. I just filtered my list. That data is what the AI needs to train itself. So can you do it in 1 second? Is it a bunch of data that comes down to one output? And is there a lot of data to train the AI? That's a great example of those are the 3 elements where AI is most effective. What does deployment look like? This is a question that I wish more people would ask earlier in the buyer's journey. When you're dealing with deploying AI, it's a big endeavor, even for something. If you think, oh, it's only my team, right? Well, as we showed in the slide earlier, onboarding touches 4, 5, 6 different teams, right? And deployment of AI is a little different in terms of any other software category, and that's because every AI product, whether it's ours or if Workday or Alio or whoever it is you're talking to, every AI needs to have some version of some sort of like training period for the model, right? And as vendors, we do a lot to optimize that for clients by, there's global stuff that it's relevant to every customer. For example, in the HR world, the abbreviation ESAT is always employee satisfaction, right? So I don't need to train our AI that ESAT means employee satisfaction, but you might have very specific documents or very specific like homegrown applications with esoteric APIs or whatever. AI needs to be trained on all that, and it's one thing that you need to be aware when you're talking to vendors is, if you think of like we just bought Marketo, for example, and they've been very nice to us in the rollout, and they're very specific. I'm like, okay, this is going to be the week we're going to set up the forms, and then this is the week we're going to set up the email capture, and then we're going to do your web analytics on this, and then we've got ongoing training. Your AI vendor should have all of that, but then they should also be open and upfront about what sort of training data is needed and how long that's going to take. Which brings me to my next question is, what resources from our team will you need? It's another one that doesn't get asked early enough in the process, right? A lot of times when you're working with a company to market to and sell and implement software with them, the first person that you talk to might not be the last person who signs the contract, right? In our world, we've got we'll talk to like an HR specialist who's got direction from their manager, who's got direction from like the CHRO to go research some onboarding automation solutions or whatever it is, right? This question needs to be asked early because it helps everybody involved scope what they're about to get into, right? You might need to know, like, if there's particular applications you use, you need to know that, or I'm sorry, rather the vendor may need to know, do we need to work with their engineers to help kind of build onto our API platform to get the data out that they want? Does the company need someone internally to help train the AI model, whatever it is, right? Ask this question early and ask it often, because as you kind of go through the journey, some of the stakeholders might change. What kind of support is included? This is whether you're buying AI or you're buying something, and no offense to Calendly, I love Calendly, but something as simple as like a Calendly subscription, understand the support that's included. Confused users are never going to be happy users. And therefore, from my point of view, a confused, unhappy user isn't going to continue to be a customer. From your point of view, a confused and unhappy user isn't going to get the value that they were hoping to get in the first place, right? And some software, and not all, and this isn't necessarily the case with AI, but it can be. It really depends on how deep you're going here. But some software can be very daunting if you don't ever get proper training, right? I don't know, and if I was talking to a bunch of marketing and sales professionals, this joke would go over a little better, but I'm sure in the HR space, there's plenty of examples of this too. But if you've ever gone in the admin section of something like Salesforce and you don't kind of know what you're getting into, you haven't had the support and training before you click on that admin button, your brain's going to like explode and melt and come outside of your ear just because it's so complicated, right? Ongoing support is very important. And with every vendor, I'm sure you guys have seen this over the course of your careers, everyone looks at support a little differently. Everyone says they have awesome support, but like really understand what it looks like and what it means. How is security managed? If you have company data, you have sensitive data, especially in a situation like HR where you've got, with benefits, you might have health data, you might have, you'll definitely have social security numbers and PII. If there's feedback coming in, about, God forbid, some sort of impropriety happening inside the organization, it's very secure stuff, right? So I always encourage everybody to ask very specific things like, are you SOC 2 certified? Is this thing HIPAA compliant? When did you get it? Let me see the documentation. Do you follow GDPR? Does this use two-factor authentication? What data lives on your servers versus what are you pulling in from ours, right? This is important because it's not something that doesn't get asked early enough. Now, this next question, this is kind of a somewhat confrontational one, but we get asked it, and I think you should ask it too. And that's, how do I know if your product is actually real AI? So if you go to SHRM next year, you walk by the vendor area, and it's the happy hour or whatever, and they've got the wine going, you're talking to the people at the booth. 95% of them are going to have some sort of AI messaging somewhere on their booth, or the marketing people will be talking about their AI. Part of this is because honestly, there's been a bit of a kind of next frontier gold rush on this kind of in this world, and I think there's some BS that you come across. We built our product from the ground up with our own NLP and matching algorithms and intent algorithms, and like some people take like a click download report and tell you that an AI generates the report for you. Challenge your vendor on this, because if you're going to be buying something that you're going to kind of trust in helping some version of decision making for your organization, like you want to know what they're doing, right? So we've talked about some questions to ask. Now let's get to the fourth and final bullet point on this, and that's successful implementation, the red section, as I've called it. So successfully implementing AI in your organization comes down through to three things. One, involve all key stakeholders. Two, define success up front. And three, understand the system. I go back to the rollout. What does deployment look like? And this is why we ask that question, because you have to understand these things. So involve all key stakeholders. So educate all the users involved. Make sure everybody, both the end user, the admin, and IT, everyone understands kind of what it is we're looking to do here. Everyone knows the terms. Everyone understands their roles, and that there's open feedback lanes, so everybody knows where they can go, right? AI implementations, the good ones, are going to touch a lot of different apps. They're going to touch a lot of different data stores, and you just need to get everybody involved and everybody open up front. And two, remember, AI needs, and again, depends on the implementation, depends on what you're doing. AI is going to need some sort of training period, and there's, the first day of being a customer, your experience isn't going to be as great as the second day, which isn't going to be great, because as the algorithms and as the AI gets trained, it's going to get better and better and better at doing what it does for you. And if everybody understands that, your feedback, the experience is going to be a lot better. Define success up front. Here's my stock photo of a goal, right? The goal should be really clear. So a goal like, we're looking for a solution to help sort through resumes without bias. That's a clear goal. We're looking to reduce the inefficiencies of our onboarding system. It's a very good, clear goal. We're looking to help train our managers on how to be better motivators for their people, right? Clear goal. Where things break down and where expectations fail is when people think, oh, there's this omnipotent AI we're gonna install on a server somewhere, and it's just gonna make all my problems go away. It's like, no, pick a goal, pick a starting point, work with that vendor, get that goal met, and as if the relationship is good, expand beyond. Then you'll also kind of really understand, if you've got a good relationship and you really understand the roadmap and the other features of the product, like, is this a relationship can I tackle this one problem and then now go to the second one, or should I go evaluate other vendors for it, right? You'll understand that better if you have a very clear goal in mind. And then again, understand the system, and just in general, remember that AI works on inputs with its training data set, its outputs, the predictions and actions, and then the feedback loop, the human-in-the-loop intervention, new data to train the model. All AI vendors, all AI more or less works this way. I mean, my little graphic here, this is an example of how we pull out data and come out with an answer for complicated things. But every topic you cover with we call them customer success, but other vendors might call it account managers, whatever it is. Every QBR or weekly touch point you have during rollout, it's all based on understanding the components of the system that you just installed, right? Like your ongoing ROI that you're going to get out of the purchase that your business makes is going to be based on all parties involved understanding the system that they bought. So, which was just a reminder that after rollout, make sure that the product is continually used, right? Okay, so recap. Go through the sections in single slides with colors now, right? Bridge the AI education gap. Everyone needs to understand the basic terms. Everyone needs to do further research based on their role within the journey here. But understanding the AI education gap is going to make you understand what it is beyond all the whiz bang that you're going to see during the demo or the feature walkthrough or whatever it is. Understand the systems that you have that you're looking to augment to plan your purchase. Remember, every system involves inputs, outputs, and a feedback loop, and understanding those and the processes inside of those is what's going to be needed to properly scope the price and the relationship you're looking to get. Ask the right questions. The worst question, the only dumb questions are the ones not asked, or it's amazing what you get in life if you just play dumb and ask questions. Always ask questions, whether it's very early on, if you're on if you're talking to an SDR versus the account rep, if you're talking to IT inside your team, if you're talking to your manager, if you're talking to someone on your team that you've assigned to do this, just ask a ton of questions and keep those all documented. And finally, make sure that there's a clear goal and roles are defined so that implementation goes smoothly. So, Capacity, we are a knowledge sharing and support automation platform. And, we are, our mission here, we have it literally painted on the wall in the lobby, is to help teams do their best work. We have a team of 78 of us now. I think there's only 65 in this picture. But we are, a group of people here in St. Louis that are, I really mean it when I say this, that we're really trying to build something cool and useful and driving value for our customers. And I really can't thank you guys enough for spending an hour, especially an hour during lunchtime, to come here and listen to this presentation. I attend a lot of webinars myself, just I'm always curious to see how other companies are sort of using them as a marketer, but then just as a professional, I like to learn things and as well. So, I'm very grateful for you guys coming to spending some time with us, and for some further reading here while we're doing Q&A, I'll leave these up so you can copy them down and visit them, or obviously these will be in the slides when you download. But again, thank you so much, and happy to take some questions.
Oh, yeah, great, Justin. I can see some questions coming in here. Would you like me to forward them to you?
Yeah, I mean,
or read them out?
Yeah, just read them out. Yeah.
All right. First off, are you going to be sending us peanut? No, I'm just joking. But it is in regards to the PB&J example. Are there any easy ways to test a system or count the inputs of a system in the work setting?
Yeah, interesting. So the way we do it, and it's a little different depending on how complicated it is. But my first piece of advice is always to get out a whiteboard and just really rough sketch it, and then bring someone else in and refine it, and bring someone else in and refine it, and get it down to where you've got a good idea of kind of what is involved. And then, during the course of that exercise, obviously write everything down in more permanent medium as well. But you kind of get a gist of the complexity kind of going into it, right? Onboarding is going to be a hell of a lot more complicated than setting up email, for example? It's a good question. Any others?
Actually, and on that too, yeah, one of the questions was, besides onboarding, can you give other examples of systems in an organization that could be easily automated?
Yeah, easily automated. And again, be very clear, onboarding isn't necessarily easily automated, right? And in every, I had one of the slides we do in our demos, I'm not going to share here, but something like onboarding, you can't automate the entire thing. I cannot automate a new hire and their manager having their initial one-on-one, right? Or I can't automate like them going out to lunch together with the team, right? But there's steps of it that can be. So excuse me, name another system that can be automated. I mean, pick one, right? Like loan origination. We work with mortgage companies a lot too, and we do some work there. Is every step of the system automated? Absolutely not. The degree of complexity varies between all of them. I think like the most common ones you see, and especially in the HR space, just following vendors here, the recruiting pipeline, that's a big one. And then you're starting to see a lot too, the big HRIS and HCM kind of applications introducing automation pieces within the subsets of what they do. So really any system can be automated to some degree. Very few of them can be fully automated. And anyone that tells you otherwise is, might be blowing smoke, right? So important thing to keep in mind.
That's great. And then we have a question just came in as well. What happens if malicious or accidentally incorrect information is entered into an AI system?
Yep. So it's funny, right? Like you ask that question yourself and you immediately go to like the movie Terminator, where Skynet becomes self-aware and all society collapses, right? That's not generally the case. This is why the feedback loops are so important, and understanding the anomalies that come from it, right? We have internally a dashboard that we watch that looks at what we call as our match rate, right? So someone asks a question of capacities, the chatbot component of the platform, and it successfully answers the question. We call that a match, right? We just anonymize it and let's sort of look at like the overall match rate. And then whenever we roll out a new algorithm to improve that match rate, we just sort of watch it. And you kind of see the graph either go up or you see it go dive. And you're like, oh crap, something's wrong. Go in there, fix it, roll it back and change it. This is why the feedback loop of the system is so important. And that way, if you get malicious data, it should negatively impact the outputs of the system, where maybe it wouldn't, and maybe there's a slightly a harder to detect thing, as if there's like, a data breach or something and people are pulling social security numbers out or whatever it is, right? This is where all the security points become very important. And with any purchase or any software that sort of touches that kind of stuff, this is where like if the CI, what do they call it? Chief CISOs and whatnot in the organization have ops teams have tools in place to manage and watch that stuff. But it's really all about the feedback loop and the monitoring.
Oh, that's great. So I think I'll just give you a second if you have any closing comments. We're just getting to the top of the hour here. And yeah.
So my only closing comment is that, when someone from our marketing team or sales development team or whoever it is, reaches out to you after this webinar, and you go attend another webinar in this virtual event that HR.com is putting on, and you talk to whoever sponsored that webinar, salespeople. Like, try to remember some of the things that we talked about today, and really ask questions, grill them. Don't you need to get the information out of the vendor you're talking to, such that you're able to make the best decision for your business. And I would love to I'd be happy myself. I've got my email address up here. Shoot me an email if you hear from, you're talking to somebody and you're like, hey, is this guy full of crap, right? Or I'd be happy to help, right? Even if it's not with capacity, but if you're looking in different directions, I'd be happy to help. And thank you very much for attending.
All right. Thank you so much, Justin. Excellent presentation. Thanks to the sponsor Capacity, to Justin again, and to all of our valued HR.com members. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, there are some questions that we ran out of time, so we'll make sure Justin and them will follow up with you.
Cool.
And as mentioned in my introduction, we will send an email to everyone with your credit information, or you can go to your hr.com account and check it out there. A brief announcement, all of the hr.com webcasts, live and archived, are accessible as for all members. You can earn 5 HRCI and 5 SHRM credits per month. If you watch more than 5 webcasts in a month, which we hope that you do, we'll bank your credits, and to unlock those credits and redeem the extra ones, upgrade to a recertification program. Your feedback, it's important to us and it's important to the folks at Capacity. Yeah. So take a moment to fill out the exit survey. Thanks again, guys. Have a great day, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.